Just take a look at that cup of coffee you might be holding right now. You know, the thing that gets your day started, the drink you share with a friend. But what if I told you that a few hundred years ago, that exact cup could have gotten you killed? And I mean that literally. So yeah, let's get into the bizarre and, frankly, deadly history of coffee.
It sounds completely unbelievable, doesn't it? But for rulers all over the world, this drink was seen as such a huge threat that they were willing to back up a ban with a death penalty. The big question is, how on earth did that happen?
Okay, so our story kicks off way back in 1511 in the city of Mecca. This is the very first time we see an official legal attempt to outlaw coffee. And the reasons behind it? Well, they pretty much set the template for the next few centuries of coffee hating. Now, what's really wild is that this whole thing started because a powerful guy got his feelings hurt. Seriously. The governor of the city, a man named Khair Beg, kept hearing that people were hanging out in these new places called coffeehouses and writing poems that made fun of him. So, what's his plan? He literally puts coffee on trial. He gathers doctors and religious scholars to argue that it's just as intoxicating as forbidden wine, and surprise, surprise, the court agrees with him. Just like that, coffee is banned, the beans are burned, but the story doesn't stop there. His boss, the Sultan of Cairo, heard about it and pretty much said, "This is ridiculous," and overturned the entire ban. Of course, that wasn't the official reason he gave. Publicly, the justification was that coffee houses were basically dens of sin, just like taverns. He claimed they were filled with gambling and all sorts of other shady activities. So you see the game here? The public reason was all about moral decay, but the real, private reason was all about crushing political dissent. And here's the best part, the perfect ironic twist. Coffee, of course, survived and spread like wildfire. Governor Khair Beg, on the other hand, not so much. He was actually executed a few years later for embezzlement. I guess picking a fight with the world's favorite drink wasn't such a great career move. But that was just the opening act. Let's jump over to the Ottoman Empire, because this is where the war on coffee turns genuinely terrifying. We need to talk about Sultan Murad IV, a man who became one of coffee's most brutal and most feared enemies ever. So why was the Sultan so terrified? Well, his top advisor laid it out for him perfectly. The problem wasn't intoxication. I mean, people who drank alcohol just got drunk and happy and they were easy to manage. But people who drank coffee, they stayed sober, they stayed alert, and they sat around talking, often about how much they disliked the government. For a ruler like Murad, a sober public was way more dangerous than a drunk one. And his reaction was extreme. Murad didn't just sign a law and let other people enforce it. Oh no, he became the enforcer. He would dress up like a regular person, walk the streets of Istanbul at night carrying a massive 100-pound broadsword, and if he caught you drinking coffee, he would execute you himself, right there on the spot. Now, you'd think that would stop people, but it didn't. So the punishments were, and I'm using air quotes here, softened. For your first offense, you'd only get a severe beating. But if you were caught a second time, you were sewn into a leather bag and thrown into the Bosphorus Strait to drown. Yeah, a death sentence one way or another. And yet people did not stop drinking coffee. It's just mind-boggling, right? It shows how incredibly devoted people were to this drink. They knew the risks. They knew the Sultan himself could be waiting right outside. But that desire for a daily cup of coffee was stronger than their fear of a very certain death. And this fear wasn't just stuck in the Ottoman Empire. As coffee began to spread into Europe, so did the panic. Rulers and religious leaders all across the continent started to see the exact same threat. In Italy, the attack was a religious one. You had priests who were calling coffee the devil's bitter invention. They saw it as this satanic black drink, a poor substitute for holy wine, and they were begging Pope Clement VIII to ban it for all Christians. It was really shaping up to be a major showdown. But the Pope did something amazing. Before he made a decision, he said, well, let me taste it first. And he did, and he loved it. According to the legend, he declared that the drink was so delicious it would be a shame to let non-Christians be the only ones to enjoy it. And with that, he basically baptized coffee, making it totally okay for his followers to drink. Over in England, the fear was all political. In 1675, King Charles II tried to shut down every single coffeehouse, convinced they were hotspots for people plotting against him. Well, the public backlash was so fast and so huge that he was forced to cancel the whole thing just 11 days later. But maybe the most bizarre story of all comes from Prussia.
For King Frederick II, the problem was economic. He famously declared, "My people must drink beer." He wanted them supporting the local beer industry, not spending money on imported coffee beans. His solution? I'm not making this up. He created a special police force of coffee sniffers whose entire job was to walk the streets and literally sniff the air for the illegal scent of roasting coffee.
So we've seen bans for pretty much every reason you can imagine: political, moral, religious, economic. But there is one single thread, one deep-seated fear that connects all of them. So what was it? What was the one thing about this simple drink that had a sultan in Istanbul, a king in London, and priests in Rome all in a total panic? The answer, it turns out, is incredibly simple. The danger of coffee was that it didn't do what other forbidden substances did. It didn't make you drunk or dull your senses. It did the complete opposite. It made people sober, it made them sharp, and it got them talking to each other. And for those in power, a sober, thinking, talking public has always been the biggest threat of all. And they were right to be afraid. History proved it over and over. The French Revolution, planned in the cafes of Paris. The ideas behind the American Revolution, debated and refined in the coffeehouses of Boston. Even the revolts in the Ottoman Empire were often organized in the very coffeehouses Murad IV tried so hard to destroy. These places were the world's first real public forums, where people from all walks of life could meet, share news, and argue about ideas. So when you boil it all down, the centuries-long war against coffee was never really about the coffee beans at all. It was about what the coffee fueled: thought, debate, and the free exchange of ideas. The threat was never in the cup. It was in the conversation that the cup inspired. So the next time you pick up your morning coffee, just take a second. That simple drink survived executioners, kings, and popes. It won. Not just because it wakes us up, but because it brings us together and helps us think. The very thing that once made it worth the death penalty is the power we get to enjoy with every single sip.